the time that you need a community, it's too late, right? I mean, you can't just microwave a community together, right? In terms of, oh, ICE is here, let's let me try to connect with folks who I've never connected for in life. Welcome back to In the Meanwhile. I'm Marcus Harrison Green.
And I am Nora Kenworthy. Marcus, we finally made it to February. It's only 97 days of January.
I was going to say February of what year, Nora? Because to your point, that January seemed like a year, heck, a decade in and of itself. Like I'm still, have some very, very bad thoughts and nightmares about, waking back up in that month. So I'm pinching myself to make sure we have made it through the 31 days that was January.
It was a special version of Groundhog Day this January. One that gave me many more gray hairs than I wanted.
Oh my Lord. Yeah, I tell you, I might start doing the Just for Man like hair dye. Like I never thought so, but it's prematurely coming, man. It's prematurely coming, I tell you. Anyway.
Well, it's also such a good time to be celebrating Black History Month.
Yes, we do actually still celebrate that on this podcast. At least I know that there are some other media outlets that are a little quiet about it, shall we say, Nora?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe Trump is celebrating by closing the Trump Kennedy Center and sparing us all the pain of having to deal with that fest of white mediocrity.
I gotta say too. I mean, it just says everything you need to know that they're closing the center for 2 years. Ostensibly, right? I use that word, very, very, very intentionally, shall we say, for repairs, and yet on the I believe on America's birthday, July 4th of this year, they'll be doing a UFC mixed martial arts event on the White House lawn. I mean, it just I mean, we really have, again, I mean, I don't want to continue to overstate how much we are living in the movie Idiocracy, but I mean, my God, it's mapping pretty on point, Nora, is what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah, I think there's even fewer people willing to perform at the Kennedy Center than there are willing to go to the Melania film right now, which is really saying something. So.
That's neck and neck, I'd say. That's the photo finish on that one, let me tell you.
Yeah, well, obviously a lot happened this week, but we're going to chat with you in particular about a trip that you made. Well, Marcus, welcome back to balmy Seattle. I hear you've been freezing your butt off all week.
Yeah, it is like springtime here.
It's weirdly hot here.
Yeah, I gotta say, it was like colder than the Iceman's draws in Minnesota, man. Like I was doing my best to layer up and stuff. I was not quite expecting that cold, which is, I will say, I had kudos and admiration for Minnesotans before, hearing about them being out in negative 20-degree weather a couple of weeks ago when they were protesting. But my God, like it's one thing to read about that. It's another thing to have it like biting at your face.
Yes.
So yes,
Meanwhile, Minnesotans are still jumping in frozen lakes and things, and seem to enjoy this kind of weather. So
very much, yeah. They take sort of this strange pride in it. Like when I was talking to them, I was like, "Huh, okay." I mean, hey, to each their own, right? I mean, so here we are. But yeah, I was fortunate, I'll say, and I'll use that term deliberately, to accompany the group Common Power out on their organizing trip to Minneapolis. And our listeners, if you've heard Common Power before, that's because we've had their executive director, Charles Douglas III, on, I want to say, twice? Yeah.
How you guys doing?
We're good.
What's your name, my brother?
Charles.
I just want to say that this is a great state. Where you from?
Seattle.
So yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, you guys putting up with these people.
Oh yeah. That's why we're here, to learn from y'all, because y'all are right at the forefront of it. We may be next, so we're here taking notes.
Probably. So here's the thing, Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
L.A.
Yep.
here in Chicago,
Yep.
Chicago.
Chicago.
They all get ready and then come here and do their mess here, and then they were ready to try to go after Portland, Maine,
Yep.
and Lewiston, Maine,
That's
and then
right.
they're going to try to bully Seattle. And
Yep.
they got plans for all of us
They
around
do.
here.
I would say just to be able to go out there, and I would say it was a heavy 3 days or 4 days that I was there, in the sense that the day before I fly out, we heard about in my own community of South Seattle, there were deaths, homicides of two young men in the Rainier Beach community. And then the very next day, flying out to go to a vigil for Alex Pretti, the ICU nurse, of course, that was murdered by ICE agents. And then the very next day, we visit the memorial site that's been set up for Renee Good in
Wow.
this. Yeah, and it was wow. I tell you, grief has no geography, right? And in some ways, there was a part of me that was like, my community back home is hurting, and I'm flying 1,300 miles to bear witness to the grief of another community. But then at the same time, it was, I think that connection, at least for me and some of the other folks I traveled with for Common Power, was very much, yeah, recognized in the sense of, even what, regardless of whether, you had these two people, and Alex and Renee, who lost their lives to state violence. You had two people in our own community who lost their lives to violence. It was still a failure of this country in this way, right? Of it to either deal with, various acts of violence, whether they're, and quite frankly, to deal with our continued addiction, our failure, I should say, as a country, to deal with our continued addiction to firearms as well, and just, force as sort of this predominant authority in our country.
Yeah, and Marcus, I mean, all of these are deaths of institutional violence in some way, right?
Yeah, no, and I think, as you said, I mean, this is just a continued sort of, for lack of a better term, just a continued showcase of institutional violence in our country, right? And I would tell you, one of the things though and we'll get into it more, but one of the things that I was extremely, I get hardened by, or continuously encouraged by, was the fact that there were so many people in Minneapolis who were like, we're not waiting for our civic leaders, quote unquote, um, to do anything. We ourselves are doing stuff. As I talked to this one older gentleman, and he said the conversations we're having in Minnesota, when you go and you greet somebody, it isn't how are you doing, it's what are you doing, right? And I think that very
Wow,
much.
that's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, you would see it though. Like we went to, um, a few folks. They went to an Indian. A few folks in my group. They went to an Indian restaurant. Um, that was close to our hotel, and you saw community members come at the end of, when the restaurant was closing down, at the end of everybody's shifts, to go and just escort, in these Indian immigrants to their cars to make sure that they were okay, right? And I have to say, with you, it's such a contrast, right, in displaying courage, in the sense of you, this very week we had the Washington Post, yeah, shuttered some of its newsroom and continued to dismantle it.
Very
And
large part of its newsroom, actually.
yes, yeah, it's I think a third,
Not
as a
sure how
matter of
much is
fact.
left.
Yes, there's not much left to shutter, right? But
Democracy is very much dying in darkness
yeah.
right now.
Our some would say in the bright light of day too. No, but I mean, and then you saw the photos and the images of all these rich and powerful people at the premiere for the, I guess, documentary, Melania, right, from Tim Cook of Apple, to Andy Jassy of Amazon and so forth. And it's like you have, like, it dawned on me, man, when have the powerful in this country been this weak, right? In the sense of, you have regular everyday people like Alex Pretti, like Renee Good, willing to sacrifice their lives for what
Yeah.
they believe in. You have these powerful people, these captains of industry, all they're willing to sacrifice is their dignity in order, to underscore and make sure that their financial interest,
Yeah.
continues on uninterrupted, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that to me, it just shows you how bankrupt, right, the elite are in this country, and that doesn't even, and we're not even gonna get into some of the
The
stuff that
Epstein
came out in the
files,
Epstein
for
file.
example.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's been such a theme of this week is just the incredible weakness of our billionaire leader class. And I think people have been pointing that out with the Epstein files as well, that how fragile do you have to be to prey on children in order to have a
Mm,
sense of power when you're already this powerful in the world?
right.
Like, what else do you need?
Yeah.
Did
I
you not have enough?
I I mean, in desperate need of some level of,
Yeah.
intense immersive counseling,
Control.
obviously,
Yeah, I
right?
don't yeah. Um, yeah. Anyways, I have so many questions for you about Minneapolis, but do you wanna kind of walk us through just why you were there in the first place and, kind of what the purpose of the visit was?
Yeah, so again, I went at the, invitation of Common Power. They're, for for lack of a better term, they're an organizing, force, that is based in Seattle. They do a lot of field work in terms of trying to get people, organized around, I won't even say progressive issues, but just, issues
Human dignity
of you're right,
issues.
of dignity and humanity and democracy. And, they went out there to in many ways try to learn some lessons about what, was going on in Minneapolis, what organizations, what, everyday people were doing, so they could bring that back up here to Seattle as, we many of us here in Seattle are sort of preparing for what we feel is the inevitable in terms of also being a target of this administration when it comes to, vastly increased ICE activity. I believe our governor, here, Bob Ferguson, as well as our Attorney General Nick Brown, have both, stated that, to paraphrase them, that it's, highly likely that something like that happens. I happen to also, of some folks from Seattle Indivisible chapter, along with, at least one person from our mayor's office here in Seattle, also, came with us, for the same reasons. And I would tell you, it was eye-opening in the sense, for a variety of reasons, but, I remember the first so the f we get there, we go we get our renter car, which is, this big sort of, you know, suburban, Kia kinda thing that's, that's looking, it almost looks like an ICE vehicle, unfortunately.
Good choice.
Right, but I'll tell you, you need those big gas guzzlers in Minnesota. I have a little bit more understanding these days, but anyway, um, I said suburban, I meant like Yukon, but anyway, um, and so we're stopped at this light, and there are these, protesters on the corner, at this intersection, and we honk to them, obviously in support, and then, the Minneapolis police car pulls up next to us, and they're honking in support of the ICE
Oh my god.
protesters, and I'm like, "What
Wow.
bizarro world do we live in?" Right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, particularly given the context of Minneapolis, George
Yes.
Floyd, the killing of George Floyd, obviously, the murder of George Floyd, I should say, the killing of Philando, Castile, this being such the touch point and epicenter the, for the protests that happened in 2020
Yeah.
against police violence, and
Yeah.
now you fast forward 6 years later, and you have police honking right at in
That
agreement
is
with
wild.
protesters.
I mean,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be wild to us, but that is wild. Um,
Yeah.
wow.
No, no, very, I mean, it kinda spoke to what I'll call sort of the situational alignment of this moment, right? Where,
Yeah.
you have these, I would say most likely a temporary and very temporary allegiances, because, everybody is sort of getting, everybody is, sort of under the thumb, at this point in some way or form from these, federal forces. Um, then after that, we end up going to the site of where, Alex Pretti was killed, and, you see it. It's this, it's across the street from this coffee shop that which is uh, giving free coffee to folks who want to go to the memorial site, and they're also opening up their doors for a warming station for protesters. Um, at that point when we got there, there was a drum circle from Native Americans who were also protesting the fact that four local Native Americans, four locals from the Native American community, I should say, had been detained by ICE
Yeah.
earlier in the month. And then you see this, or at least I saw this white guy. He's walking, past me with this shirt that says "Stop killing us," and I just sort of kept thinking of the
Yeah.
expansion of us kind of thing, in the sense of
Yeah.
like, you know, I mean, and it's been said over and over again in these, in these last couple months, but how Black people have been warning folks for the longest time, right? That the pain and the state violence that had been visited upon us, it's easy to expand that and to visit it upon other people. And we've seen that now, right? Where if you're not, quite frankly, if you're a white person who doesn't, you know, uh, go and align themselves with what is going on now, you yourself can also be subject to death.
Right. Right. How does that feel to you as a Black man to be watching that realization come in some ways, like, so late? I
Yeah, it's it, it's surreal in some ways, and in
like,
some
we're
ways,
6 years past 2020.
right? I mean, it's surreal in some ways, but I was talking to one of the organizers with the community, with Common Power, Ben is her name, Binnh, and her family immigrated from Vietnam when she was 7 years old, and we were sort of talking about it, and kind of laughing to keep him from crying, if you will. But I mean, she made a good point, right? Where at the end of the day, particularly with the urgency of this moment, the fact that people have gotten there, no matter when or how
Yeah.
or why, let's just in this very moment, right? Let's just be glad that they did, and then hopefully once there is an after this, and we can we can debrief collectively,
You can do some unpacking.
right? Then let's do that, right? And and I get what she was saying. That being said, it's like it's literally the day after two young Black men died in my own community, right? And you're kind of like, man, I mean, it is a point of like, God, had you all been around and realized that before? I'm
Yeah.
not saying, right? I mean, it's impossible. Obviously, it's impossible and irresponsible to be like, this could have been avoided. But I do wonder how many deaths could have been avoided had we actually just woken up back.
And, like, taking what Black communities were saying seriously decades ago.
Absolutely, right? Yeah, I'm not even talking
Yeah.
about 2020 is too recent,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
2020 was late.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Um, yeah.
But
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of grief as well as a sort of like, well, at least we're here now, but
yeah.
also probably a bit of like, is this gonna last? Right?
Yeah, there very much is this going to last? I think that was I was talking to a Unitarian minister who was there at the um he was in Minneapolis, and his congregation has done a lot in terms of uh escorting um folks from, to their cars, uh doing carpools for, immigrant children, so their parents don't have to go and that type of thing. And we sort of talked about the fear. Reverend Oscar Sinclair is his name. We sort of talked about the fear of, okay, what happens if, once this disaster is averted, quote unquote, people either go back to sleep, are there some, I don't know, some level of backlash, right? Which we saw, in 2020, post George Floyd, where folks were like, I think we've gone too far in this direction, even though it was like, have we? Right? I mean, we're in some
Much
ways,
like Me Too went too far, right?
right,
Like
right. But I will say this, because I do want to. This has struck me about our conversation that I had with Reverend Sinclair, is he said, so many people at this moment, we rush to try to make meaning out of tragedy, and sometimes tragedy is just tragedy, right? And
Yeah.
that isn't saying that we can't recognize our response to it, and we should, but also we need to just sit with this tragedies, at some, all of us, in the sense of like really looking it at the face and calling it what it is. And I think that struck me in the sense of like, I am glad obviously there's action and there's activity and that needs to happen. But I think collectively, right, we need to not let these deaths go away. And in terms of from the social conscious, right? Like I ended up going down to visit George Floyd Square, and I was on the way there. I was in an Uber, or sorry, I was in a Lyft, and my Lyft driver's name was named Warsam, and he's a Somali immigrant. And as we were driving, he was saying, "Yeah, after those, yeah, after those two people were killed, he was referencing Alex Pretti and Renee Good. He was like, it seems like George Floyd's just an afterthought." And I thought about that because, as I got out and walked around the, George Floyd Square, it was only me and um, this gentleman named Maestro, who's identified himself as a caretaker
Mm.
of the site, where he's planting flowers and polishing up stuff and that type of thing. Just truly caretaking the space.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, it's still here, in the sense of like it's still, this the not just the site, but the reasons why we have this site here for George Floyd, meaning, the issues of state violence, the continued issues with deprioritization, I should say, of Black life, right?
Yeah.
The our inability to ever have any type of enduring,
Yeah.
excuse me, reconciliation. Um, and that struck me as, you had people, passing by this intersection, just going on with their lives, and it's like, and I'm not saying that everybody should continue, be in a state of perpetual grief for 6 years, but it's also like, you wonder, what have we really learned? So, I mean, to come back
Yeah.
full circle to your point, right? Of, you know, will folks maybe forget some of this, right? I don't know. I mean, I hope not, right?
Yeah.
I hope this ends up being, a truly bellwether moment where
Yeah.
there is some level of radical transformation.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious to hear kind of what you were seeing of this on the ground in Minnesota, but at least here in Seattle over the last couple weeks, it in my communities, it's felt like there's this pretty intense tidal wave shift
Mm,
of how people are thinking about not just ICE, but community collectives and community protection. And,
yeah.
like, I'm always skeptical about the white liberal impulse, right? And, like, especially, like, as a like, admittedly, as a white person who's also subject to those impulses sometimes, but, you know, having lived through you and I have talked about this, the, like, acute performativity of a lot of 2020,
Mm, yeah.
I I was not looking forward to a bunch of people, like, kind of, like, trying to get woke again,
Yes.
and
Yeah. The
and
the renewed wokeness, yes.
yes, but it feels really different, and I don't know if
Mm,
that again, I'm not sure it's gonna last, but I am watching a lot of people show up with a lot of vulnerability and
yes.
humility and really start asking hard questions of like, what do the most vulnerable in our communities need? And they're pushing each other to figure that out. They're pushing each other to
Mm,
think about like how we translate essential resource documents, how we do
right.
listening sessions in a way that is really safe for community members. How do we take the organizing that's happening in well-resourced communities in Seattle and push it to marginalized communities where most of the ICE, raids are actually happening right now. Um, and I I haven't seen that kind of soul searching, introspective kind of questioning of one's approach and motives
Mm.
in previous moments.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually brought that up because that's a conversation I had on my trip with Kathleen Carson. She heads up the Seattle Indivisible chapter. And I kind of asked her about like, what she felt about, particularly in a city like Seattle, but I mean, it's not just Seattle, where sort of the performative liberalism, right, from sort of the brunch time liberals, if you will, that this is the college du jour, and then going about our lives, and she was saying sort of the similar thing that she thinks this is sort of an inflection point, that there is more, there's some enduring traction here, right? With
Yeah.
with people, how they're sort of navigating things. And she said that's why she felt, particularly as she's organizing folks, and she's helping to organize the local No Kings March that'll take place March 28th. The the next one that will transpire. And she was saying that for her, it's continuing to wake up to the fact that as we organize, we have to do it with the fact that you're organizing imperfect people, right? Who
Mhm.
may be at the 101 class on things, if you will, when
Yeah.
it comes to, when it comes to civic engagement or social justice and so forth. And there is a point of meeting people where they're at, but walking them on, the direction of, hey, I get it that you just woke up to this.
Yeah.
Um, and here I'll we let's help guide you towards what has been going on, by the way, what you've sort of, let's recap sort of what you've
Yeah.
missed as well along the way,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and I think, sort of to her point in the conversation we were having, there are people willing, there are more people willing to do that now, really, in sort of a true earnest way. And and quite candidly, maybe that is because it was two white people who were killed, in the way that they were killed. That being said, to sort of go back to what Ben was saying, um, we're here, and whatever got us here,
Yeah.
if we can, if we can sort of have some real level of solidarity, some real level of introspection and reflection to folks that get them farther along, then you
Yeah.
know what? I mean, here we are, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'm also seeing a lot more showing up and doing
Yes.
than, like,
Yeah.
talking about the thing. Like, maybe it was just a function of us being very isolated during the pandemic, but I thought
Mm,
there was a lot of, like, talking about what you should be doing, like, "You should wear a mask, and you should
yeah.
do it," But it wasn't a lot of, I mean, there were dense networks of mutual aid that were happening, but that was not the majority of people who were just showing up and being like, "Who can I escort? Who can I drive? Who can I give
Yes,
food to?
yes.
Who can I do?" You know? And now it just feels like everyone is like, "I'm gonna show up and do some things every single day," and, um, it it's I don't know, it feels different, and I don't know what to do with that optimism, Marcus, because it's very scary to me.
I get it, right? It is hard to have faith, right? I mean, that being said, what you said actually reminded me of something else. Reverend Sinclair told me when I was talking to him. He was, I kind of had asked him too, what was sort of different, particularly when he was at the heart of it in Minneapolis at the time with
Mm,
George Floyd, and then now this. And he said, around that time with because COVID was still going on, it seemed like, to your point, right, it was in some ways about disassociation, right? Because we
mm.
were sort of separated for each other. And he said the difference in this time is that this is about connection, right? This is
Yep,
about connecting with our neighbors and community members, and um, asking them what they need, quite frankly,
yeah,
and then going in and fulfilling their needs, right?
yeah,
And one of the things that he said, in terms of just like, he was like, if you if Seattle folks have, like, if you and he said, just not just Seattle folks, but anybody, like, I will tell them, if they want to learn anything from Minneapolis, it's like, particularly before there's a huge ICE presence.
yep.
He said, like, you need to have a reinforced community right now,
Get
right?
your people
Yeah.
organized. Yeah.
Yeah, because he said, like, I mean, you can't, I mean, by the time that you need a community, it's too late, right? I mean, you can't
Yep,
just microwave a community together, right? In terms of, ICE is here. Let's let me try to reach, connect with folks who I've never connected for in life, right?
Exactly.
And even if, and Kathleen from Indivisible said, like, even if, right, uh, by some miracle, we don't get a huge ICE presence in Seattle or wherever our listeners might live, though, even with you organizing a community, right? I mean, your community itself is better off, right? In the sense that it doesn't,
Yes.
even if it's not ICE that is a threat to you. I mean, there are other things, right, that are going to come up, and it's
Totally.
never a terrible thing, right, to have a strong, tight knit, supportive community around you.
Totally. Yes. Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think, um, anything that we can do in this moment to get more connected and to start having not just these conversations, but just knowing how we reach out for help when we need it, because this is not gonna be our last crisis, right? But, like, God, wouldn't it be lovely if one thing that came out of the long arc of COVID times is that we realize that we need each other more and that we have to get more organized in community with each other in order to face the next crisis. I mean, that would be so nice.
It would be, right? I
We'll see.
to your point, we're touch and go at that point, but no, I mean, that being said, right? I mean, I am, I've seen some evidence of that, right?
Mhm.
We ended up going, with Common Power. We ended up going to this church called the DHH Church with Reverend Sergio, and um, he's actually had a couple of national papers report on him.
Mhm.
I want to say he was in the New York Times as well as
Yeah.
NPR, where he still is a conservative pastor, but he was a Trump supporter who now, sort of recanted and renounced Trump because of the, how the immigrant community has been treated, how the Latino community, has been treated.
I'm a pastor from Mexico, and I seen how cartels works in Mexico. And just so as a pastor, I'm telling you this: ICE in Minnesota is acting worse than the cartels in Mexico. In Mexico, cartels don't target kids or pregnant women, and ICE is just not respecting the law. The difference between ICE and cartels in Mexico is that ICE has immunity here. They killed Renee Nicole, and they're just doing horrible things here in Minnesota. We've been providing food for like 27,000 families since this happened 7 weeks ago, and a lot of people call me daily with problems. Daily they call me. So this person called me at 12 a.m. That they couldn't find the baby. So I made some phone calls to attorneys, to the chief of police of different cities, and it's just incredible what we're going through here in Minnesota. It's just horrible what's going on. These are the criminals that the ICE is arresting: a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And one, they're getting the terrorists that they were saying, the drug dealers. This is just devastating. And another thing that is happening in Minnesota is that, they're fighting for religious freedom and stuff like that. Latino churches, 80% of them are closed. They're not having services. They're targeting Latino people, legal, undocumented, citizens, residents. They're arresting DACA recipients. They're arresting people with work permits. They're just, you know what it looks to me here? This looks like ethnic cleansing. That's what it looks like. This is racism in the name of patriotism. And that's coming from a pastor that believes what the Bible says. And what they're doing, I guess the new Pharaoh does not know Joseph.
And we talked a bit, and I was, there's sort of that Seattle, progressive part of you is like, how could you have ever,
Yeah.
did this? But the fact that this person is out here feeding, what I think 300 people a day or something like that, and their church are out like helping with rental assistance for folks who have stopped going to work because they're scared. And it's like, yeah, he's putting his works, if you will, over his faith in that way, or maybe his works are outgrowth of his faith. I'm not sure, right? I'm not an uber religious person, obviously, but to talk to him and say and ask him, I swear I was trying to be non-judgmental, and I think I was successful, but I was like, Reverend Sergio, um, you see so many people who claim to be, Christian or people of faith, and yet they're allowing the community that they serve to suffer. And he said, with sort of I can think the wisdom that comes with reflection is, he said, yeah, well, to me, I couldn't continue to see people suffer, and I couldn't see people continue to starve, right? And I couldn't see people continue to be hurt, and ultimately, I couldn't continue to deny the reality of what was going on, right? And so, to your point, Nora, like, I do think it's a bit different, and hopefully people finally waking up to the fact that the reality in front of their eyes, um, is more powerful and stronger and has, more, um, veracity, of course, than the lies that they're being fed. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I wanna also ask you if there were other lessons that you feel like you were just learning from organizers about what's working in this moment, what people in places that are trying to prepare, can learn. Um, I feel like your trip holds a lot of wisdom for all of us in terms of how to face the current moment, and I guess I just wanna give you more time to kind of surface some of that.
yeah, I think that's a good question. Like, as I sort of mentioned earlier, there was, somebody from the Seattle mayor's office who came with us, Matt, McIntosh, and
That's awesome.
yeah, it was great, right? I mean, and it's good for Seattleites. It's definitely good to know that this is, a concern, right, of our mayor here. But and I got to actually talk really briefly with Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota, who, they're and Minnesota is, I without Attorney General Ellison had to be somewhat coy in some of the things that they're trying to do just because of the legal ramifications. But what kept coming up to me was sort of civic ingenuity, right? In the sense that you see, New York right now, they're, I think the Attorney General there, Alicia James, is moving forward with having, essentially civic observers of ICE to ensure that they're
Mhm.
not, doing anything unconstitutional. You have the same thing going on in Chicago with Mayor Johnson, who's trying to ensure that ICE is being watched and observed and surveilled, right? So that they're not doing anything untoward towards citizens, and then not just citizens, but to
People.
anybody, right? To
Yeah.
people. Yeah, let me underscore people. You have Philadelphia, who their city council there is trying to pass legislation called I think it's called the ICE Outlaw. I'll correct me in the show notes if
Yeah.
not, but who would very antithetical to what's going on with ICE right now, and so I think in some ways, other cities like Seattle and cities across the country that haven't, and let's just be honest, blue cities across the country uh, that haven't had an escalated ICE presence yet, even though, quite frankly, there is still a lot of shit that's going on with ICE, right? I mean, we still have people who have been
Yes.
detained here. You still have people who are being abducted here.
Who are not
Um,
able to go to work or school
right.
because they're too afraid. Yes.
All right. Who live
Yeah.
in fear, right? But I
Yeah.
think, which is why I think it's important that our cities now are sort of looking at what these other cities have done, in preparation. I know,
Yeah.
our governor here in Washington State, Bob Ferguson, as well as our Attorney General Nick Brown. Um, I know their offices are. Um, let me be delicate about this, as I'm not the hugest fan of our governor, but um, Nick Brown is just fine in my eyes. But I know that they are trying to
They're
obviously
trying.
look at, what they can do, legally, and get a bit creative, in terms of how they will handle this potential threat. And
Well,
not
and
potential threat, but the threat that is
yeah,
here and ever
incoming.
present right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Yeah, and I also wanna give a shout out, I think there have been states that have been more effective than ours.
Yes.
I saw just this morning, New Mexico has figured out how to ban the building of new detention facilities, which
Yeah.
I would love to see
Well, I mean,
happen in our state. So,
well, how
I think
long? Yeah, also to your point, like how long have people been talking about trying to get rid of the
yes,
Northwest Detention Center? That's privately
exactly.
run,
Yes.
So
So I think there's lots of room for people to continue to do that advocacy with their state and local
absolutely.
representatives as well.
Yeah, imagine that, Nora, you have detention centers, you end up filling them up. I don't know how that happens. So, I I will say that actually reminds me of a quick aside on the so we were in Minneapolis when we were in Minneapolis, we went to the Whipple building, which is
Uh-huh.
essentially their, ICE headquarters slash detention
Yep.
center. And there were just so many demonstrators. This is in the middle of the day, right? So they're taking off of work or whatever, and they are just out there, um, you know, not wanting to give a moment's peace to any of
Yeah.
the ICE agents that are coming out. And you see these ICE agents, right, with they're in these cars and they have their mask on and they're pretending not to know and hear, or sorry, they're pretending not to hear anything. But I mean, they obviously do. And you have people calling them traitors and um, everything, in the book. And it's funny because we're in our we had got out to talk to a few different people, and then we're we get back in the car, but the Yukon or whatever it was, and it again, it kind of looks like an ICE vehicle, but for the we had talked to all of the protesters except for I guess this one guy who had just come. And so anyway, we're driving down the street, and everybody's they're giving they're shouting out their support to us and like, yeah, go man, go, it's great, go back to Seattle and bring some lessons. Ooh, cheering, and I got my fist up. And then, right when we get to the end, this guy's like, fuck you, man. we're like, we're like, we're like, he
You're like,
obviously,
good energy,
yeah,
wrong direction.
it's one, yeah. So you're just absorbing that. It's like, I understand the intention of it. I get the that was one time where I understood the profiling that was
Yeah.
going on. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Marcus, I'm not sure how much you were really connected with local media while you were also there, but it has been a wild week for media and press freedom. And
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking so much about your passion for local journalism and what it can do for communities, and it's been such a powerful pillar of what's happening over there. I mean, is there anything on that you wanna kinda share with listeners?
Yeah, I did get a chance to check in with a friend of mine and visit the Minneapolis Star Tribune,
Nice.
which is the main paper out there that's been doing
They have been doing
a lot of
amazing
great
work.
coverage of what's
Yeah.
going on. And yeah, I mean, I mean, it just, I don't know if I can, say anything more than you kind of just said about underscoring the need for a well-resourced, well-staffed local paper, particularly at times like this, that has been holding everybody accountable, and not just ICE agents, but also, quite frankly, the city council as well as the mayor, in terms of getting them to live, if you will, into their what you might call civic integrity. That's civic integrity is the phrase that I've picked up going to Minneapolis and just talking to the residents, in the sense that integrity being this thing that you say that you are, right? And how much alignment is there between what you say you are as a city, as a state, as a country, and your actions, right? And the things that you do, right? And your choices. And look, I don't want to romanticize any eh, human beings, but to be out there and see people that the vast majority of which I talk to and witness really live into that integrity of sort of, it's, we are all in this together, that our community doesn't segregate its compassion, doesn't prioritize our compassion. Our community does not um, hold, anyone above or below in terms of, their needs and their needs for safety, their needs to not be harassed, their need to just live in peace, right? Um, I gotta say, I mean, it was just a exemplary model of what I'm hopeful other cities do, what I'm hopeful our city here in Seattle does, right? And I would say, like, again, I had mixed feelings about going in the sense that, my community in South Seattle was hurting, right? And yet I'm going 1,300 miles to witness somebody else's pain, and there's pain here in my community. But I'll say it left me with sort of a strange sense of agency. I won't even say hope, but agency, right? Where I think it's what I've come to recognize is that, the opposite of despair isn't hope, but it's a feeling of agency, a feeling of potential. And I think coming back here, um, like I see that. I see that in us. I see this, not just the seeds of that, but I see that, happening. Maybe it's not on as vast of a scale, right, as Minneapolis, but it is happening here. And you do see communities forming. You do see neighbors getting to know each other. You do see these bonds that are being strengthened. So yeah.
I'm really struck in this conversation thinking about the place where we were at when this podcast started and just feeling like that really wasn't happening. Um, there was so much upset about Trump 2.0 and there was so much fear, but, like, there wasn't a sense of real unity and organization and, people getting together and people deciding to protect each other across boundaries. I I don't think I would have expected that a year into the Trump presidency, I might actually feel hopeful about those things because it felt like they were so intent on destroying that from within, and it's really cool
Yeah,
to
and
see it happen.
absolutely, and which is why I think that, I guess, like, typical mediocre white males, I think they kind of overestimated just how it, how much their sort of agenda would go unquestioned, right?
Yes.
And how much, people would sort of just, uh,
Roll
bow
over.
to
Yeah,
exactly, and grain
yeah,
truths that, again, like, some elites certainly have, but I think ultimately what one thing that I think has been very, wonderfully revealing is the fact that I we can kinda see now how bankrupt these elites were who
yes,
were supposedly, our saviors and
yes,
our champions and this and that. It's like it just reveals them for what they were. They never
yeah.
were. They were just very self-interested people
Yeah.
who
Yeah, and all these, corporate accomplices who have all the power and resources in the world, who are really the only people putting up with this right now.
Yeah. I I mean it goes back. I mean, I hate to, I guess, do a sports analogy, but, with the Seahawks in the Super Bowl here, and I will, we will not jinx them or hex them, but they used to, there was the Seahawks, the sort of first Super Bowl era of the Seahawks, they would say, "We all we got, and we're all we need," right? And looking around over in Minneapolis, being
Yeah,
back here in Seattle, yeah, I mean that's just is affirmed to me.
yeah,
Like, yeah, we all we are all we have, right? But we
yeah,
don't need much more than that at all.
yeah, yeah. Well, I can't think of a better place to end this conversation. Should we, um should we head into 8 ounces of joy?
Why don't we do so? Yeah.
Okay. What I mean, you've shared a lot of joy with us. Do you have more left?
um, yeah, I mean that's a great question, Nora, actually. I think, okay, this is I know I've just shared all of this this like uh, wonderful, hopeful stuff, and I'm going to return to the petty kind of right now.
Yeah.
but,
Let's do some
but,
petting.
but I'm kind of glad to see the paltry paltry sort of returns, if you will, or how much money the Melania documentary made
Oh my
after
God, yeah.
Amazon threw, what is it? I think it was,
Wallow in that.
yes, yes. I think they threw a total between promotion and purchasing the documentary $75 million into it. It only made $7 million. I know some folks are trying to spin it that it was a success, but no, no, it was not. And so it also to me just reveals again the utter just vapidness, quite frankly, of our power elite in the sense of you had Jeff Bezos, obviously the founder of Amazon, who, was willing to orchestrate this $75 million purchase of just extremely shitty documentary, and yet lay off a third essentially of the staff of the Washington Post,
Yes.
and
Yes.
with press still as imperfect as our media is, and I should say, I don't want to lump all media together, but as imperfect as our journalistic ecosystem is here, the fact that it was a paper that was, that essentially was doing some great work in its reporting, and the fact that they also think they fired the reporter or laid off the reporter who was specifically writing about Amazon, kind of in
Mhm.
some ways, it's whether that was intentional or not, and I have my thoughts about that. It definitely just sort of continues to lay bare,
Yeah.
um, again, the bankruptcy of these people in terms of
Yeah.
morally. So, yeah.
And I think we're not gonna forget that. I don't think people are in a very forgiving mood right now
No,
about this
no,
moral
I
bankruptcy. Um, yeah. Um, and I was also leaning towards petty in the sense that Elon Musk has been, tweeting out about how money can't buy you happiness,
mm.
and that gives me perverse joy, but I have something better. I have something slightly less, adolescent
Yeah.
for my 8 ounces of joy this week. Um, I know you've been traveling constantly this week, but I don't know if you saw that, earlier this week, Ian McKellen, was on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
Oh, I did not.
Um, and kind of in the middle of one of those kind of classic, funny conversations about, what he's up to, he basically decides to launch into a full Shakespearean monologue
Huh.
from Sir Thomas More, which is about the cruelty with which the people of England treated immigrants. And he just goes through this. I mean, he does, like, the full, Shakespearean delivery of this incredibly powerful monologue, just kind of staring into the camera and walking around on stage, and it's just breathtaking.
So in order to set it up, we really need somebody to shout that the strangers should be removed. Could someone do that? Grant them removed! And grant that this your noise hath chid down all the majesty of England. Imagine that you see the wretched strangers, their babies at their backs, with their poor luggage, plodding to the ports and coasts for transportation. And that you sit as kings in your desires, authority quite silenced by your brawl, and you in ruff of your opinions clothed. What had you got? I'll tell you. You had taught how insolence and strong hand should prevail, how order should be quelled. And by this pattern not one of you should live an aged man, for other ruffians, as their fancies wrought, with self-same hand, self-reason, and self-right, would shark on you, and men like ravenous fishes feed on one another. You'll put down strangers, kill them, cut their throats, possess their houses. Oh, desperate as you are, wash your foul minds with tears. And those same hands that you, like rebels, lift against the peace, lift up for peace. And your unreverent knees, make them your feet to kneel to be forgiven. And say now the king, as he is clement, if the offender mourn, should so much come too short of your great trespasses, but to banish you. Whither would you go? What country, by the nature of your error, should give you harbour? Go you to France, or Flanders to any German province, Spain or Portugal, nay, anywhere that not adheres to England. Why? You must needs be strangers. Would you be pleased to find a nation of such barbarous temper that breaking out in hideous violence would not afford you an abode on earth? Whet their detested knives against your throats, spurn you like dogs, and like as if that God owned not, nor made not you, nor that the elements were not all appropriate to your comforts, but chartered unto them. What would you think to be thus used? This is the stranger's case, and this your mountainish inhumanity. William Shakespeare, 400 years ago.
I think it's not just lovely to see someone do something that they do so extraordinarily well, and do it in a really beautiful and timely way, but it just reminded me of all the people who are just kind of figuring out how this moment connects to what they're good at, and
Yes. Yes.
just figuring out how to do that, and I don't know, I mean, I think he has a lot of privilege. I think he can kind of walk onto a TV show and do whatever he wants, but he walked there and he said, "You know what? I'm not gonna be funny tonight. I'm gonna be heartfelt, and I'm gonna do the thing that I do best and try and sway people." And I feel like I've just been seeing that from so many people over the last couple of weeks of just figuring out what you can contribute and doing it bravely. And, yeah, maybe we'll be able to put a clip from it in the show or in the show notes because it's really breathtaking.
Yeah. I will definitely go and research that. So thank you, Nora, for bringing it up. Yeah. It does sound joyous, I must say.
Well, folks, if you've spent this week watching people build networks of care faster than the government can actually tear them down, we're glad you're here for it and witnessing what actual resilience looks like in our communities.
Yes, and we are thankful you are part of this community each and every week. Please do support us at inthemeanwhilepodcast.com so we can keep bringing you the hard and the good.
And huge thanks, as always, to our producer, Jessica Partnow, and to Aham Aluo for the music.
And you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Yes, Blue Sky, that app you keep meaning to check, but then you see one more thread on the other place and 3 hours disappear. It happens all the time.
The doom scroll is real. And if you know someone who's organizing, someone who's showing up when it matters, or someone who just needs to remember that spring actually does come after the winter, please share this episode with them.
Absolutely. Then thank you, Nora, for that poetry that we all needed to sign us off at this episode. Just a reminder, folks, that new episodes drop each and every single Friday.
Absolutely. The crocuses are still coming up, and so are we. We'll see you in the meanwhile.